Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning into this channel. My name's Jordy. I'm going to be the creator of the Life After Christian Discipleship channel on YouTube. I think it's very important on here that I give you my testimony to kind of set things off for this channel and just give you a little background on where I came from. So stay tuned and I hope you gain something from this. I'm going to start my testimony by reading to you from the book of Psalms. It's going to be chapter 139, verse 7 through 10. If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. Now, this verse holds true throughout my life, and as my testimony progresses, then you'll start to see and understand why no matter what I did in life, even before I knew who Christ was, He was always there with me. So for my testimony, I really don't want to give the devil too much credit and sit in the sin of my life too much, but I'll just hit the highlights and the parts of my testimony that created core memories from me and defined who I am as a child up until adulthood. So just like Psalm 139, for 32 years of my life, I was living in the uttermost parts of the sea, meaning I was in the lowest parts of my life. I was living in just utter chaos. Living in this sin for 32 years, I didn't understand God was with me, but I soon would realize that He was the whole way. So when I talk about core memories, I want to explain to kind of what the core memories are. Core memories are defined as anything that took place in your life that you attached an identity to. And most of the time, before coming to a life of Christ, these core memories created a false identity in who I truly was as a human. I attached myself to worldly things and wasn't really seeking anything further than that, just the next worldly thing after another. Yeah, so I had a pretty typical family. Grew up in a decent sized home. I had two other siblings and two parents. We went to church pretty regularly, so church was a normal thing for me. What I wasn't prepared for as a child was the amount of hurt that came from just too much exposure to real world situations that my young childhood mind couldn't really wrap itself around. A big deal for me in the church that I grew up in was the rapture was preached a lot about, and speaking in tongues and then interpretation of tongues. I just didn't understand any of this. And at my age as a young child, all I could see was God was about to take my parents away and people were speaking a language I just didn't understand. And so it scared me. And so just like that, I kind of turned my back on the church, even though I was there and present as a child. I just shut my brain off to any type of relationship with God that could be had within the church. So moving up into my early teen years, unfortunately, I was exposed to, we'll call them explicit images in the forms of magazines and other types of pictures and things that I could have available to me through whether it be the Deer Lease Camp or going to a store and seeing a magazine on a counter. At an early age, I was exposed to these explicit images that started a unhealthy process for me as far as objectifying women goes, and from there I kind of gained an unhealthy experience with relationships with women. I learned to objectify women instead of viewing them as children of God like it was intended. So again, back into my teenage years, I did go back to church. I was a little more mature now and aware of things and had a better understanding of church, but still it wasn't quite there for the right reasons. The church I went to as a teenager, I met a girl and I had a big crush on her. And so as a teen, you go to church to learn about God, but now I'm here just because this other girl is here. And so I developed a relationship with her, and that was the only reason I was going to church. God had nothing to do with it still at this point. And just like that, one day I think we're okay and everything, and we're together, and I show up the next day, and she has a new boyfriend, and I guess just failed to mention to tell me that part. So again, just like with church hurt as a child, I turned my back on God once more, because how could God possibly be in a situation that allows me to just keep getting hurt? And so now you see I kind of just started to create this defense and this coping mechanism that God was out to hurt me and not help me. Remaining in my teenage years, going through school, I was bullied and pretty much mentally abused by teachers and students there at my school, up until the point where I had to move schools. My parents thought moving me schools was going to be the answer, and they were just looking out for me, trying to do the best they could. But basically the bullies and the abuse kind of just changed faces as I moved to a different school. So it didn't really resolve the issue. And to add to it further, it was a Christian school at the same church that I grew up in that caused me so much confusion as a young child. And so now the culmination of events happening in my life just shielded me and turned me off from God's word and God's promises that I had no idea about because I had shut myself off to Him. The only difference between me as a child and me as a teenager now is that I learned to handle my problems with violence. I began to have physical altercations with other people, and I seem to enjoy it. And so instead of me turning from that abuse and violence that was given to me, I just returned the favor in a more physical, violent way to those that were hurting me. After the physical violence and abuse and just kind of running rampant around our small hometown, that outlet quickly ran out, and so I turned to a different type of source. That was alcohol. I would go to parties on the weekend. Sometimes during the week, I would lie to my parents, tell them I was just going to stay at a friend's house when, in fact, I would go over there, but it was just to get alcohol. And then we would leave that place and not come back sometimes till daylight the next morning, or even if at all. And my parents thought I was just over at a friend's asleep, not causing any issues. I can see now that I reflect and look back that God had been with me the whole time. He wasn't guiding those steps, but He was carefully watching me. He was going to let me do what I was going to do, and He spared my life up until that point. And looking back and reflecting, I'm so grateful for that today. So all of these issues I experienced in life early on, they were just bottled up. I learned to just shove things down and suppress them with violence and alcohol and just partying and just staying away from true healing because I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it meant. The world painted a view of God that I just didn't want to accept. So I had gotten the opportunity out of high school to play baseball at a university there near my hometown. And so it was an honor and a privilege, but I was carrying all this baggage with me into that experience. And it manifested itself and actually got me kicked out of college and off the baseball team because I was at a party one night and I was drinking underage and the cops showed up, so I decided to run. Well, as I'm running through the woods, I end up stepping on something that I sustained a huge cut on the bottom of my foot to where I couldn't walk anymore. It required me to be hospitalized and stitches and medications because it got infected and all of these things, and it ultimately led to me not having baseball anymore. And when I lost baseball, the only thing that I thought could sustain me, I immediately dropped out of college and just went into the workforce. Eventually, a divine encounter happened in my hometown. A series of wildfires came through our town, and they needed a lot of help. They didn't really know if you had training or what kind of experience you had. They just needed help. So a buddy and I, we got our stuff together, and we went down and helped. And I seem to have enjoyed it and kind of fell in love with the process that kind of started my journey into the fire service. And so I put myself through Fire Academy with that same buddy, and then ultimately worked a full-time job going to night school to put myself through EMT class. And so I became certified and started the job hunt for a job in the fire service. I landed a job in 2015 at a fire department not too far north from my hometown. That's where I still am today. It's been June, will be 10 years for me at this department. When I started the department, I met a woman who had a 17-month-old son, and we became serious pretty quick and ultimately moved in together and just started figuring out life while raising her kid. Again, remember that Christ was nowhere in my life. I had no foundation to lead a family. I was completely lost and just masking the symptoms of being lost. All these problems and issues were still bottled down, and eventually they would come out. So everything seemed fine for the first few years. Up until a point in 2019, everything was going good. And then I had been working part-time for an EMS department, and we got called to a child having a seizure, basically is how the call came in. And it's just me and a fellow employee that could just drive. He wasn't really much on the EMT side or the medical side. And so we show up, and what I thought was going to be just a 5-year-old having a seizure ended up being a 5-year-old laying on top of his bed, fully clothed, covered in bruises, with one eye swollen shut from a beating he had sustained from the mother's boyfriend. The beating was bad enough to where the child was unconscious and showing signs of a traumatic brain injury. And so I scooped him up and we put him in the ambulance and we got him to the hospital, did everything I could for him. Ultimately, he succumbed to his injuries and died 2 days later. The mother and the boyfriend were charged with murder in this case, and they're in prison today. For me, that experience peeled the scab off a wound that I had been pushing down and not really taking care of. And so all of these anxieties and fears and frustrations and anger and outlets that just weren't working, now all of these things came out at once, and I rebelled and revolted against my family. I almost lost my job altogether. This really is what started the journey towards Christ for me. And Christ had been guiding me this whole way, and he's just going to allow me to mess up enough to where I give up. And so that's ultimately what had started happening in 2019. So fast forward after this incident, I have now lost my relationship. I was engaging in relationships outside of my current relationship that I should not have been, with people close to my workforce. I was doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. I lost my fiance, my kid. I lost my house. All I had was my truck and a floor under my desk at my office that I was sleeping in. And so for me, this was the lowest point that I thought I could get to. Christ was still nowhere to be found in my life, and I turned back to worldly things to try and cope with these feelings I was having. I would pretend I was staying late to work and finish up on paperwork after everybody left, and then I would go get a mattress from upstairs in our supply room and bring it into the office and sleep in my office because I had nowhere to go. From there, I would wake up extra early before anybody got there and put the mattress up and just tell them that I got to work early. Nobody knew any different. We had a party one night it was around Christmas time, and I had gotten intoxicated with alcohol one more time, and I overdid it way too much, and laying on that floor in my office, feeling like I was dying. I was ready to end my life. I didn't feel like I had a purpose anymore. I had lost everything I had built and worked towards. And, at that moment I decided to pray instead. And I didn't know what I was praying for. I didn't know what I was praying to. I just cried out. I was like, God, I need your help. I need your help. And so that ultimately showed me God's face in that moment on my floor, with nothing left but just hope. It's just a small ounce of hope, looking towards God. If he was there, this is when I needed him. And he revealed himself to me. Nothing dramatic happened from that point. I would just pray every night. Still had no direction, nowhere to go. And then one day, a buddy reached out to me and said a studio apartment he used to rent from a guy came open and was available if I needed a place to stay. So I reached out to the guy and put a deposit down, and just like that, I now had a place to stay. It was incredible for me to have that, just to get out of that space and out of that fear of somebody catching me sleeping on the floor and getting into my own place. What I didn't know was happening is there was a neighbor that was living right next door to me that was a Christian woman with a servant heart, always looking to spread the gospel and at least encourage others to do the same. And so dramatically our paths crossed. So one day my 8-year-old and I were bringing pizza inside, and she stopped me. She said, I recognize this little boy from somewhere. And it struck a conversation up between the two of us to where she actually knew my 8-year-old's friend from school and was related to her, actually. And so we put the connection together, and ultimately the conversation led to her inviting me to a Bible study at someone from her local church's house. And so I told her, sure, yeah, I would go. It was still a few days away, so I had time to back out of it if I needed to. I had no desire to go. So the day came when it was time to go to church, and she texted me and asked if I was ready, and I told her I wasn't going to be able to go. If I was being honest, I don't have any desire to go. I don't want to be there. I associated anything with church or Bible study to be just a glimpse into my past as a child. And when that girl broke up with me and showed up with a new boyfriend at the other church. So I didn't want any part of it. And her willingness and obedience to God led her to just pull into the driveway and honk on the horn and not give me a choice. And so, a leap of faith, I got up and got in the vehicle and we went to Bible study. So, yeah, the small group was just a bunch of normal, everyday people just getting together and eating and have a fellowship. And there was no pressure to be there. I felt extremely comfortable as soon as I walked in the door. Everyone greeted me with a handshake or a hug and introduced himself. And some of them kind of knew who I was just from the fire service in this local town. But it was very important that they approached me in the way they did. It was so intricate and divine how everything worked itself out to allow me to be there and be comfortable and actually rest. I went for a couple of weeks, and then finally Christ revealed himself to me, and I asked a simple question to them about how you choose a church, because I was just scared of church. I didn't want to be in church. I didn't want to be around church. And so one lady, in her obedience, simply stated that you just show up at our church here at 11 a.m. and pray about it, and we'll figure the rest out. And so that's what I did. So yeah, the first church service I went to, I was just filled with love and what Christ actually was and who he was to me and how I could have a relationship with him. And that same church service, I walked to the back and I met a man by the name of Eddie. And I asked Eddie what I needed to do to give my life to Christ, because I was ready to do that. And Brother Eddie walked me through the process and prayed with me, and I accepted Jesus into my heart. And on May 22nd of 2022, I became a newborn Christian. So what's unique about Eddie is he didn't just stop there. Eddie pursued me for several weeks after that, discipling me and teaching me how to grow in my faith and not just accept Christ and then just go back to the real world. It was a process and a mission that I was going to have to undertake to learn more about Christ and how he lived on this earth and what he did for us and how our lives can now mimic that. But he also gives us instruction on what we are to do as Christians moving forward to promote the gospel so others can be saved as well. And so I thank the good Lord for Brother Eddie as he mentored me through that process. I quickly learned, however, that just because I'm saved doesn't mean this life gets any easier. A few months after becoming saved, I suffered from a blood clot in my leg that broke loose and actually moved through my heart and into my lungs. And it's called a pulmonary embolism, and it was cutting blood supply and oxygen off to the rest of my body. And so I spent several days in the ER getting tests done and ran on me, and they were telling me that, there's a chance I wouldn't make it and that I was going to die if these things progressed or got any worse. And so a quick reality set in, but it was also a peaceful reality that if I did die today, Christ found me right before it was time for me to go. And if I hadn't have allowed myself to get to that breaking point, all of these steps starting from childhood all the way up until this point, I was going to go to hell, and I wasn't going to be saved by anything because I tried to do everything on my own. And after Christ revealed himself to me, I realized that nothing I can do is going to get me anywhere. It's all in the completed work of Christ and what he did on the cross. So there was a peacefulness to understanding that I may pass away and that it was going to be okay if I did. So by God's grace, I was able to heal from that pulmonary embolism. It didn't progress any worse, and the medication they put me on stopped it pretty quick. We were thinking COVID may have been the cause of these blood clots because I tested negative for any kind of genetic markers or hereditary blood work issues that my family's had in the past. So like I said, by the grace of God, I was able to heal and move forward. Shortly after that, Brother Eddie got a hold of me about looking into a mission trip to Africa to preach the gospel or the good news to uh, unreached groups in different regions of Zambia, Africa. And so you can imagine how scared I was, because I understand as a paramedic that sitting idle for long times on airplanes or long trips in cars can create blood clots. And now Brother Eddie is asking me to take a 14-hour plane ride to another plane for another 7 hours just to get to this country to bring the good news. So immediately my faith was tested, and my trust in the Lord was developed more rapidly than I could have ever anticipated. But I knew who He was, and I knew what He promised, and that even if life ended on this earth today, I'm promised eternity through Christ at the end of it. So I'm able to go out and do these things and fulfill the Great Commission and making disciples with the help of Brother Eddie and the love of God in my life. And so that's what we did. The experience was incredible. It's something that I cannot mimic or make up or even explain in this video that would do it justice. The long plane rides were grueling, and it was hard, and they're tiny seats, and the airplane food is just not that great. But we made it to Africa, and I was humbled in the most realistic way possible by entering a third world country and realizing how good we actually have it here in America and in the United States. And then the work began. We started by simply just going out hut to hut, walking on feet, just as it states in the Bible, and bringing the gospel to people. And these people were so humble, and they were grateful for us to be there. They gave up any seats they had so we could sit down, and they would sit in the dirt, and they just listened to what we had to say. It's a unique advantage that we have being Caucasians over in this country that's predominantly African American. And when we show up, they know we have something to say. So why not open our mouths and preach the gospel? And that's what we did. I was able to preach for the first time in a small church there. There was only about 15 people in the church, but it was just such a blessing to just strip away all my fear and pride and selfishness, and bring the Bible to life for these people through my words. And it's an experience I just can't take for granted. So the trip was physically exhausting, but spiritually replenishing. It's crazy how this happens. Your physical body is worn out and exhausted, but your spirit is just uplifted. You can feel Christ moving in every inch of that place, every inch of that country, moving in the hearts and souls of the people. You can see it on their faces, their smiles. The kids, oh my gosh, the kids are incredible. I can't put it into words to make it make sense for you that God's moving in that country, and these people literally have nothing, but they have faith and they have hope that Jesus is going to conquer all. Yeah, so shortly after that, I met a beautiful woman here in the town I work in, and we started to date. She's a solid, good Christian woman, and I don't think I was to the point where I needed to be as far as leadership goes and relationally, and I was still dealing with some issues with my now 9-year-old's mom, just trying to navigate through these situations that I created before Christ. And so we separated, and a couple of years later, we came back to each other. Christ brought us back to each other through a pretty remarkable way. Her sister has medical conditions to where she needs IVs and medications, and me being a paramedic, I was able to provide that. So even when this woman and I were apart, we were still in contact through her sister and the need for IVs and fluids and medication. And so ultimately, about 4 months ago, I asked her to coffee after giving her sister an IV, and the rest is history. God brought us back together, and as of November 9th of 2024, we got married. We said I do, and we created a covenant under one flesh before Christ, and we're living our life together now. I'm so excited to share this experience as it evolves and unfolds, and just bring wisdom, bring experience, bring clarity to some things, to promote God's kingdom and how His will is fulfilled through our lives if we allow it. And so this is my testimony. It was a little long, but I hope you gain something from this, and I hope you understand why I created this channel. And it's just to bring knowledge of life after receiving Christ. It could be life after getting married. It could be life after alcohol, drug abuse, just whatever comes to mind when you think of life after, plug it in and just pursue the Lord in each and every step and see where he takes you. Thank y'all so much for listening. God bless you all. And I look forward to creating more content for you. Thanks.